Hey class, today we're going to get started on your first unit. Again, basically how this is going to be done. You guys will have a series of videos that you'll be watching over this unit, dealing with the PowerPoint presentations and listening to the lecture. Then you are to be filling out your own slides with the information that's being given to you. You also may want to be writing down additional information that I'm giving to you as I'm presenting the slides to you. All of this is going to be on your test, so you really want to make sure you're getting it. We won't be doing it in class, so you're going to have to make sure you get this outside of class. The first unit we're going to get into then is the evolution of psychology. And what we're going to be studying about here is we're first off on this first video that you're going to be watching, we're going to just go over the themes of psychology. Then the second video is going to be dealing with getting into the 5 schools of psychology, and that's going to take a couple of short videos to be presenting over. We'll be talking about psychodynamics, we're going to be getting into behaviorism, and humanism will be 3 of the 5 for sure. The other 2 we'll be talking about as well, but they're not going to be as important. Then we're going to get into Psychology Comes to Age Today, in which we're going to be talking about the new areas of psychology that is being developed and coming into play. And some of those are going to be dealing with cognitive psychology, positive psychology, biological, developmental, all different kinds of areas from that. Alright, so first we're going to get started going over what we call the themes of psychology. And basically what that entails is we're going to be getting into and talking about what are some of the important ideas, what are some of the important concepts, what are the important principles when we're talking about psychology overall that deals with this huge issue or this big topic of psychology in of itself. So the first theme, basically that is true when you're studying psychology, is that psychology is highly empirical. What that means is that it is the premise that knowledge should be acquired through observation. To put it simply, psychology is documentation and data driven. There's nothing in psychology when you're hearing about a study being done, or you're hearing about, or we're going to be talking about in class, about a different example of something going on in psychology, that all of those studies are very, very intensely documented and data driven. I cannot just come out with a premise in psychology saying, well, we think this or we guess that, because that's not psychology then. So everything we're going to talk about in psychology does have documentation, it does have data to prove it, it does have observation, and it is something that is required to be studied and to be manipulated and to be tested in order for it to be something that can be basically approved or said in psychology. So that's why it's very empirical. Number 2, psychology is very theoretically diverse. And what we're talking about there is that basically psychology is interrelated ideas that links unrelated events, jobs, and explains them. Now, the problem with psychology, and I guess you could say it's a problem, is that psychology is not black and white. And that is, again, something that you may want to add to your notes there to really get this understood. It is not black and white. When I give you information in class about some test that's being done dealing with personality, for example, and we go over that, that does not mean that that is 100% absolute. You could find another test that would refute what I just explained and talked about, and that is what psychology is all about. It's what we call gray. Unlike in science, where we talk about gravity, and we know gravity is pretty much 100% truth, in psychology there really isn't no absolutes, very few absolutes. We're going to be talking about theories and getting into all kinds of different discussions about psychology, but the thing about psychology is that we're all very, very different, and because of that, we all don't act the same, our behaviors aren't the same, we don't follow situations exactly the same in certain scenarios, and so what may be, for example, stressful for you is not stressful for me in terms of dealing with that area, or that issue of a behavior. And so again, we have to look at, when we're talking about psychology, that we have to be open to all kinds of different ideas and interpretations. Okay, and the third one is dealing with psychology in terms of how we think and the ways that we think in terms of psychology, is what's called social historical text. And basically there, when we're talking about all these different kinds of trends and issues dealing with psychology, when we get into all the different ideas about how psychology has changed over the years because of media, technology, and other issues, one of the things in psychology that is very, very true, no matter what part of psychology you're studying about, is that psychology is something that you can look at the past, you can use it to help interpret the future, and you can look at the present in terms of how it's going to correlate. Part of the thing about human beings is that we, even though we change over the years in terms of technology and how we develop and all of those things, there are the basic core things about humans that really relatively doesn't change much, and that in even those contexts that evolve over a period of time. So when we're studying psychology, we can look back in the past history, way back in our very first ancestor history, dealing with, for example, the issue of sex, and we can look at how that relates to today. And why is it that even still today, men are considered to be the more dominant species, but that is beginning to change more and more. And we could get onto all kinds of studies and all kinds of things that's showing that actually women now are beginning to, so to speak, wear the pants. And that's the new issues going on in psychology. So that's the third real fascination about psychology, is that it is very social historical in terms of how it relates. All right, the last couple of themes of psychology then is it is multi-causational, and basically all that means is that when it comes to psychology, you cannot say that X is Y, and that's for sure. In other words, I can't use an example that I have a student that fails a test, and I can't say, well, that student's just lazy, that's why they failed. That might be one cause of why a student didn't do well in my class, but that cannot be the only reason I can say. It could be due to the fact that maybe they just have a low reading ability, maybe the fact that they have 2 jobs going on and they have no time to study, or the fact that it could be just because they have some type of learning problem that doesn't allow them to be able to learn the information very well and to get it very well. But to say just because they're lazy, you can't do that in psychology. You have to look at all the different levels and all the different layers of what could possibly be a reason for why a behavior took place this way, or a person reacted in such a manner when it comes to whatever topic we're looking at. Okay, the fifth one is culturally heritage. And again, this is a newer one in psychology, and this is something that really has begun to take place here just recently. Years and years ago, psychologists basically just studied whites. And not to be racist on it, but the reason why psychologists only studied mostly white people is because when they were going to find test subjects, they were going to universities. And, 50, 60 years ago, pretty much the predominant race that was going to universities was white. And so they kind of just assumed then that all the other races acted the same as whites do. Today we know that's very much not the case. Basically now today psychology goes all around the world studying cultures and studying the behaviors, the beliefs, the values of many, many different types of varieties of cultures out there. And what we're finding is that we are not all the same when it comes to the things that we value, when it comes to the things that we put our stress on. And so that has really changed psychology tremendously. And we're going to get more into that as we get into some of the units. The last two then is dealing with psychology, is dealing with heredity and environment. And that is focusing on the concept of genetics, that idea of nature versus nurture. We're going to get into a lot of different examples about that. For example, does intelligence come from basically your parents, or does intelligence come from the schools and your friends and from the media sources that are out there in the environment to give you your knowledge and to give you your intellect? The last one is how we experience the world. And that's our perceptions. And again, this is very important in psychology, because as a psychologist, you have to be able to understand that the way you see how something works or how something is interpreted may not be the same as somebody else. We get this all the time, just as a good example in sports, where you have two people watching the exact same game. One favors one team, one loves the other team. There's a play and it looks like there's a fumble. You got the one fan saying, "Oh my God, they fumbled the ball. It's clear. You can see it easily." The other one saying, "No, his knee was on the ground," and you get a big argument going on. They both saw the exact same play. No difference, yet their perception of reality was very much different. And that's, again, a key issue in psychology that we have to look at, is that when you deal with psychology, you cannot just look at it from one way. You have to be able to look at it from multiple ways. So those are the 7 themes of psychology. What you're going to do next now is after you close out this video, and if you want to go back and rewatch it, or go back through it again to make sure you understand it, you will then be working on a worksheet, the 7 themes of psychology, and you're going to use this information that I've just given you, use the slides, go through and answer the questions, and then you will bring those in on class to be getting those graded and to go over. So that's it with the first video, and then we'll be starting the second video afterwards.